Supreme Arbiter Theron Vex adjusted his crystalline posture, the facets of his torso emitting a pattern of anxious blue-violet pulses. As the senior diplomatic officer of the Stellar Concordance for over 2 centuries, he had overseen precisely 1,842 integration ceremonies. Each had followed the exact same protocol, adhered to the same regulations, and resulted in predictable, orderly outcomes. The Concordance valued such precision. The ancient alliance of 316 stellar civilizations had maintained stability across 12,000 years by adhering to immutable procedures. Their bureaucracy was vast, their regulations comprehensive, and their integration standards for bringing primitive species into the galactic community were rigorously consistent, which made the message he was currently reviewing all the more disturbing. This cannot be correct. Theron's light patterns flickered in distress as he reread the transmission from the humans of Sol 3. His crystalline digits tapped nervously against his workstation. "I have verified it 3 times, Arbiter," responded his assistant Lyra, her insectoid form shifting slightly as pheromone particles drifted from her communication glands. The subtle arrangement signaled both confirmation and amusement. These are indeed their non-negotiable attendance requirements. The Concordance Council's decision to invite humanity had been contentious but logical. The bipeds from Sol 3 had developed faster-than-light technology with surprising speed. More concerning, they had successfully repelled a small pirate fleet that had strayed into their territory, demonstrating unexpected defensive capabilities. The strategic location of their system and their unpredictable expansion rate made their formal integration a necessity rather than a choice. The invitation to the peace conference at Nexus Point, the Concordance's most prestigious neutral diplomatic station, had been extended following all proper channels. The Concordance had expected the primitive humans to be awed, grateful, and above all, compliant. There had been lengthy internal discussions about how to gently guide these newcomers into their proper place within the cosmic hierarchy. The acceptance message had initially pleased Theron Vex, until he reached the attached list of non-negotiable attendance requirements. Let me understand this correctly. Theron's light patterns intensified, signaling incredulity. They demand specialized earth beverages including Earl Grey tea and something called root beer. Indeed, Lyra confirmed, her mandibles clicking softly. And they insist on bringing a cultural exchange troupe, a group of what their notes describe as struggling improvisational comedians. Correct. They require designated nap areas throughout the conference schedule to accommodate their species' biological rhythms. Yes, Arbiter. They demand the right to use idioms in all official communications, complete with a glossary that their notes admit may cause some confusion. That is what they specify. And they require a zero-gravity recreation room for what they call delegate stress relief, all listed as non-negotiable, Lyra confirmed, her pheromones now releasing a definite pattern of amusement. Theron's crystalline structure vibrated in outrage. This is unprecedented. It violates 17 separate protocols on diplomatic environment standardization alone, not to mention the security implications of specialized food preparation areas and unsupervised zero-gravity chambers. Lyra moved closer, her compound eyes reflecting the agitated light patterns cascading across Theron's surface. Might I suggest, Arbiter, that perhaps observing how they utilize these unusual requests could provide strategic insight into their species? Explain, Theron demanded, his light patterns shifting to a more contemplative amber hue. Their rapid technological development suggests unconventional thinking processes. These requirements, while bizarre by our standards, may illuminate how their minds function. Such understanding could prove valuable in future negotiations. Theron's lights dimmed as he processed this logic. You suggest we accommodate these ridiculous demands as an observational protocol? Precisely, Arbiter. We can document their behaviors under the Tolerant Observation Protocol Alpha. After several moments of conflicted light patterns, Theron relented. Very well. Authorize the requirements. but establish comprehensive monitoring of all related activities, and prepare the diplomatic staff for possible irregularities in human behavior. Already initiated arbiter, Lyra responded, her pheromones betraying a hint of anticipation that Theron found most unprofessional. The gleaming superstructure of Nexus Point Station hung in space like a perfect crystalline snowflake. Its symmetrical docking arms extended with mathematical precision. Its environmental systems maintained ideal atmospheric conditions for 37 different species classifications, and its diplomatic chambers were arranged in strictly hierarchical order. Theron Vex stood at the primary reception port, surrounded by a delegation of 23 Concordance officials representing the major member species. He had spent the previous cycle providing them with extensive briefings on maintaining protocol despite potential human eccentricities. Remember, he instructed one final time, his light patterns projecting calm authority. Observe but do not react to behavioral anomalies. The integration of primitive species often requires tolerance of cultural peculiarities. The station's sensors detected the approaching human vessel. It was smaller than expected, with an asymmetrical design that made Theron's crystalline structure tense in aesthetic discomfort. Its hull showed evidence of multiple modifications and repairs, patched rather than replaced, suggesting an improvisational approach to engineering that directly contradicted Concordance maintenance standards. The docking procedure took 43% longer than standard efficiency parameters allowed, another detail Theron recorded in his observation log. When the airlock finally cycled open, he straightened his crystalline posture and prepared the formal 12-part greeting sequence. He managed only the first 3 movements before the humans emerged. Ambassador Evelyn Reed entered first, a slender female with dark complexion and striking white hair styled in a complex, asymmetrical pattern that immediately violated formal diplomatic dress protocols. Her attire combined formal elements with splashes of vibrant color that Theron's cultural database classified as bohemian. Behind her came a disorganized group of humans in varied attire, some carrying strange equipment, others looking around with expressions that alternated between nervousness and barely suppressed excitement. Supreme Arbiter Vex. Ambassador Reed strode forward with startling speed and extended her hand. Absolutely delighted to make your acquaintance. Hope our little ship didn't keep you waiting too long. Had to jury-rig the translation matrix with some old smartphone parts at the last minute. Ingenious what our tech team can do with duct tape and desperation, isn't it? Theron, momentarily forgetting the greeting sequence, tentatively extended a crystalline appendage. The human grasped it firmly and moved it up and down with alarming vigor, causing ripples of surprised amber light to course through his structure. This is our core diplomatic team, she continued without pause, gesturing to the humans behind her. And over there, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else, is our cultural exchange troop. They're just dying to meet you all, figuratively speaking, of course. That's an idiom, by the way. First one of many. Before Theron could respond, one of the humans approached with a device emitting steam. Ambassador, your Earl Grey, just how you like it. Thank you, Sanjay. Just what I needed. She turned back to Theron. Now, before we get to the formal stuff, could you point us toward the nearest designated nap area? Several of us are still adjusting to your station's time cycle. And Diplomat Garcia, there's about ready to fall asleep standing up. Theron's light patterns swirled in confusion. Ambassador Reed, there are formal reception protocols that... Of course. She smiled broadly. We'll get to all of that. But first, she leaned closer, lowering her voice to what she clearly thought was discretion, but could be heard by at least 3 species present. Some of us really need to use your facilities, if you catch my drift. Another idiom there. It's in the glossary. Behind her, several members of the Cultural Exchange Troop had begun examining the architecture of the reception area with animated gestures. One of them, a short male with unruly hair, was performing what appeared to be an impression of the station's symmetrical design, contorting his body into geometrically improbable positions, while others suppressed vocalizations of amusement. Ambassador, Theron managed, his patterns now pulsing with strain. Perhaps we should proceed to your assigned quarters where your requirements have been accommodated. Brilliant idea. She turned to her group. All right, everyone. Follow the nice, glowing alien gentleman to our rooms. Cultural troop, try not to improvise anything until we're properly settled, please. As they proceeded through the station's pristine corridors, Theron noted with dismay that the humans seemed incapable of maintaining an orderly procession. They wandered from side to side, pointing at architectural features, occasionally stopping to touch surfaces despite his warnings, and engaging in constant vocal exchanges filled with inexplicable bursts of the vocalization Theron's database identified as laughter. Upon reaching the human quarters, further chaos ensued. The diplomatic staff immediately began rearranging the meticulously prepared furnishings into asymmetrical configurations. Others unpacked containers of peculiar Earth artifacts, colorful fabrics, strange sculptures, and numerous framed images of Earth locations and people. Within moments, the perfectly ordered space had been transformed into a riot of color, texture, and what Theron could only classify as deliberate disorder. Even worse, various aromas began to fill the air. The promised Earl Grey tea produced a not unpleasant but definitely unauthorized scent, soon joined by something sweet and buttery that one human explained was microwave popcorn, essential for proper diplomatic movie nights. When a human activated a device that began producing rhythmic sounds with multiple overlapping patterns, something called jazz fusion, Theron's patience reached its limit. Ambassador Reed, he flickered urgently, there are 37 separate protocol violations occurring simultaneously in this space. Reed looked genuinely surprised. Oh, we're just setting up. Is the music too loud? We can turn it down. The music is merely one violation. The rearrangement of standardized furnishings, the introduction of unauthorized scents, the decorative elements. Arbiter Vex, she interrupted gently, this is how humans function best. Our brains are wired for a certain amount of customized chaos, shall we say? These elements aren't just preferences. They're necessary for our optimal cognitive function. She gestured around the room. What you see as disorder, we see as creating a space that inspires creativity and comfort. Theron's lights pulsed in resigned discomfort. I shall note these requirements in the observation protocol. Excellent. She smiled brightly. Now about that zero-gravity recreation room. Is it ready? Some of our team would really like to test it out before tomorrow's sessions. The first formal session of the conference began with the traditional concordance opening ceremonies. 12 speaker drones hovered in mathematically perfect formation, intoning the 2,837-year-old Declaration of Stellar Unity in precise, measured tones. Theron noted with disapproval that several members of the human delegation appeared to be fighting to keep their eyes open. 2 were surreptitiously consuming beverages, and 1 was making small notations on a handheld device, all violations of ceremonial attention protocols. Following the declaration came the presentation of statistical economic projections by the trade minister of the Vrexian Harmonious Collective, a species known for their meticulous attention to numerical detail. The minister was 17 minutes into an exhaustive analysis of projected resource allocation efficiencies when an unexpected sound interrupted the proceedings. From a human section came a loud snort, followed by poorly suppressed giggles. All ocular organs in the chamber turned toward the disturbance. One of the cultural exchange troop members had stood up and was now mimicking the Vrexian minister's distinctive swaying motion and monotone vocal pattern, while another provided exaggerated sound effects. Horrified silence fell over the assembly, broken only by a sudden chittering sound from the Pelora delegation. The insectoid species were emanating the pheromone patterns Theron recognized as their equivalent of amusement. This triggered a cascade of reactions. The Xeranthes light receptor panels began pulsing in their laughter equivalent. The Codex representatives' tentacles curled in appreciation, and even a few of the normally stoic Vrexians' exoskeletons vibrated in what could only be described as chuckles. Ambassador Reed quickly stood and addressed the assembly. Esteemed delegates, please accept our apologies for this unscheduled cultural demonstration. Our troops sometimes gets enthusiastic. Perhaps this is a good moment to invite everyone to our informal cultural reception during the upcoming recess period. Theron was certain the incident would create a diplomatic incident, but to his surprise, attendance at the humans' cultural reception exceeded predicted participation by 278%. The designated area became crowded with representatives from nearly all delegations, drawn by curiosity or perhaps the promised Earth refreshments. The humans had set up stations serving their beverages. The root beer created considerable confusion. Many species were baffled by the concept of a beverage that was neither made from roots nor contained fermented alcohol, as the name implied. Its carbonation proved particularly fascinating to the crystalline Lithians, whose sensory receptors were stimulated by the bubbles in unexpected ways that produced what they described as delightful sensory cascades. Even more surprising was the popularity of Earl Grey tea among the Vespidians, whose thermal sensing organs found the warm beverage soothing too. Their neural pathways. They gathered around the tea station in uncharacteristic social groupings, engaging in conversation with humans and other species while cradling the steaming cups in their segmented appendages. Theron observed all of this with growing concern, particularly when he noticed Ambassador Reed moving casually between groups, engaging in conversations that appeared disconcertingly informal for diplomatic exchanges. She seemed particularly effective with normally reserved species, somehow eliciting communication from delegates who typically remained silent during formal proceedings. She is circumventing established diplomatic channels, Theron noted to Lyra, who had joined his observation post. Yes, Lyra's pheromones acknowledged, yet she appears to be gathering more substantive information in these informal exchanges than our formal information requests have yielded in cycles. It is irregular, Theron insisted. Yet effective, Lyra countered. The Drowlids have not voluntarily communicated with the Mekshar in 17 cycles. Yet there they are, sharing a nap area and seemingly discussing something of significance. Indeed, the designated nap areas have become unexpected centers of diplomatic activity. Species with compatible rest cycles congregated in these spaces, observing the resting humans with fascination and engaging in quieter, more intimate conversations than the formal chambers allowed. Theron had to acknowledge that the informal setting seemed to dissolve traditional barriers between historically antagonistic delegations. During the next day's trade negotiation session, Ambassador Reed caused another disruption when she interjected, "Let's not beat around the bush here," into a particularly circular discussion about resource rights. The translation matrices faltered, creating a diplomatic pause as several species attempted to understand the literal meaning of this phrase. The Mekshar delegation actually looked around the chamber as if searching for vegetation, while the Lithians' crystalline structures pulsed in confusion. "Allow me to clarify," Reed quickly added. "This is an Earth idiom meaning, let's address the core issue directly instead of avoiding it. We humans often use metaphorical language to express concepts. This led to an unexpected 15-minute digression as several logical processing species became fascinated by the concept of intentionally non-literal communication. The Arrhythmians, in particular, seemed captivated by the linguistic inefficiency that somehow created more precise emotional understanding. "But why not simply state the meaning directly?" asked the Arrhythmian delegate, its probability nodes glowing with genuine curiosity. "Sometimes direct statements can seem too confrontational," Reed explained. "Idioms soften the message while still conveying it. They also connect us through shared cultural understanding." This exchange led to a surprisingly candid discussion about communication challenges that had plagued previous negotiations. Several delegates admitted confusion over aspects of Concordant's formal language, which they had been reluctant to acknowledge directly. The session ultimately ran 87 minutes over schedule, but resulted in more substantive agreements than the previous 3 combined. Perhaps the most unexpected diplomatic success came from the zero-gravity recreation room. Initially viewed as an indulgence, it became apparent that the facility served multiple practical functions. The high-gravity Dorthack found physical relief floating weightlessly, a state they could never experience on their homeworld. The aquatic Mira, typically confined to specialized liquid environments during conferences, discovered they could navigate the air in zero gravity with almost the same freedom as water. Most surprising was the development of what humans called space volleyball, an improvised game using a soft sphere in the zero-gravity chamber. The activity started among the human delegation, but quickly attracted participants from other species. Theron watched in astonishment as representatives from the Zarin and Pelora delegations, civilizations that had maintained cold diplomatic relations for over 800 years, laughed together as they attempted to master the mechanics of movement in zero gravity. The game requires cooperation between historically opposed factions, Lyra observed. The physical activity appears to bypass established diplomatic barriers. It is chaotic and undignified, Theron objected, though his light patterns betrayed a hint of fascination. Yet it achieves in hours what formal negotiations have failed to accomplish in centuries, Lyra responded, her pheromones expressing unmistakable approval. By the fifth day of the conference, anticipation had built throughout the delegation for Earth's formal address to the Concordance Council. The humans' unconventional approaches had created both concern and curiosity. Theron Vex hoped for at least some adherence to protocol during this most formal of proceedings. Ambassador Reed took the central podium wearing attire that, while still distinctively human in style, at least approximated formal concordance presentation standards. Theron's light patterns relaxed slightly at this small concession to propriety. Esteemed representatives of the stellar concordance, she began, her voice clear and measured. First, allow me to express humanity's genuine gratitude for the invitation to join this ancient and respected alliance of worlds. So far, appropriate and expected, Theron noted with approval. In preparing my address, I reviewed the traditional format for new species presentations. I understand I am expected to catalog Earth's resources, territory, and capabilities as a demonstration of our value to the Concordance. Again, proper protocol. Perhaps the humans had finally recognized the importance of established procedures. However, Reed continued, I believe the past days have already demonstrated humanity's most valuable contribution, one that cannot be quantified in resources or territory. Theron's light patterns flickered with concern. She was deviating from the format. Humanity is young, she acknowledged. We have made many mistakes. Our history includes internal conflicts, environmental challenges, and social struggles that we continue to address. But these very challenges have forged our most valuable attribute, our adaptability. She gestured to her delegation. You've witnessed some of our seemingly illogical approaches, our enjoyment of improvisational performance, our need for rest cycles, our appreciation for unique beverages, our use of idioms that confuse literal translation. These aren't merely cultural quirks. They represent our approach to problem-solving and resilience. The display behind her activated, showing data comparisons. Earth developed FTL travel approximately 300% faster than the average progression time for concordant species. Our defense capabilities, demonstrated against the pirate incursion, utilize unconventional applications of standard technologies. These achievements stem directly from our commitment to diverse thinking approaches. The display shifted to footage from the conference. The impromptu comedy performance that had broken tension in the opening session, the surprising diplomacy occurring in nap areas, the unexpected connections formed over tea and root beer, the cooperation in the zero-gravity chamber. What appears as chaos to ordered minds often contains hidden patterns of innovation, Reed continued. The universe is not a predictable place. New challenges require new approaches. Earth offers the concordance not just resources or territory, but breakthrough innovation. the ability to approach problems from entirely different, sometimes seemingly illogical angles. As she spoke, a soft alarm sounded, and the chamber's lighting flickered momentarily. Reed paused, looking up with concern. "Please continue, Ambassador," urged the senior council member. "A minor malfunction in the environmental regulation system. It has been occurring intermittently for some time." "How long has this issue persisted?" Reed asked. "Approximately 12 cycles," admitted the council member. "The repair queue has it scheduled for evaluation in another 3 cycles. It is a non-critical system." Ambassador Reed glanced toward the human technical team. One of them, a stocky woman with short hair and an expression of professional curiosity, was already examining a data terminal near the wall. "If I may," Reed addressed the council, "our technical specialist might be able to offer assistance." The council exchanged uncertain glances, but the senior member nodded approval. The technician approached the environmental control access panel, studying it briefly before pulling a small multi-tool from her pocket. "Hold my root beer," she said casually to a nearby human, who took her beverage with a knowing smile. The assembled delegates watched in fascination as she bypassed the standard access protocols, removed a section of the panel, and began manipulating components in a sequence that clearly violated maintenance procedures. After several minutes of work that had Theron's light patterns practically strobing with anxiety, she replaced the panel and stepped back. "Should be good now," she announced. "Your thermal exchange matrix was caught in a feedback loop. I set up a temporary bypass that should hold until you can get a proper fix. You might want to check your other environmental systems. Saw some power fluctuation patterns that suggest similar issues might be developing elsewhere." The chamber lights stabilized completely, and the environmental readouts on the council's monitors showed immediate improvement in efficiency metrics. "This repair is unauthorized," Theron noted, his patterns expressing alarm. "Proper maintenance procedures require." "But it works," interrupted the senior council member, an ancient Lithian whose crystalline structure bore the accumulated complexity of centuries. "And it appears to have identified additional potential failures before they occurred." The elder turned toward Ambassador Reed. "Your demonstration is most compelling, Ambassador. Please continue your presentation." Reed smiled. "I believe my colleague just illustrated my point more effectively than any speech could. Humanity doesn't offer perfection or complete adherence to established patterns. What we offer is adaptability, innovation, and the willingness to find solutions in unexpected places." The presentation concluded with a proposed framework for Earth's integration that preserved human autonomy while establishing cooperative protocols with the Concordance. To Theron's dismay, it included provisions for ongoing cultural exchange initiatives and modifications to standard Concordance communication practices to accommodate more diverse interaction styles. More disturbing still was how many council members appeared receptive to these unprecedented proposals. The Concordance leadership convened in the High Council chamber following Earth's presentation. Theron Vex presented his formal analysis, emphasizing the numerous protocol violations and potential risks of integrating a species with such unpredictable methodologies. "The human's approach to established procedures is haphazard at best and deliberately subversive at worst," he concluded, his light patterns projecting firm conviction. "Their integration would introduce unacceptable levels of procedural uncertainty into Concordance operations. Yet their effectiveness is undeniable," countered Lyra, who had been invited to present an alternative assessment. "The repair incident is merely the most visible example. Their cultural exchange troop has facilitated more interspecies dialogue in 5 days than formal channels have achieved in recent decades. Their nap areas and refreshment stations have become unexpected diplomatic forums where long-standing conflicts are being discussed with unprecedented openness. Anecdotal successes do not justify systematic disruption," Theron insisted. "Perhaps some disruption is precisely what our systems require," suggested the senior council member, whose ancient crystalline form commanded immediate attention. "The Concordance has maintained stability for millennia. But at what cost? Our rate of innovation has declined by 4.2% per century for the past 3,000 years. Our response to emerging threats has become increasingly predictable to our adversaries. The human's adaptability may appear chaotic, added another council member, a Vespidian whose compound eyes reflected the chamber's light in faceted patterns. But their defensive response to the pirate incursion demonstrated the value of unpredictability. The pirates expected standard concordance defense patterns and were completely unprepared for the humans' approach. The debate continued for hours, with faction after faction presenting analyses and predictions. To Theron's dismay, even traditionally conservative members seemed swayed by the practical demonstrations of human innovation. The temporary repair incident was repeatedly cited, along with numerous diplomatic breakthroughs that had occurred in the human-established informal settings. Finally, the senior council member called for a decision. We have maintained our protocols for good reason. They provide stability, predictability, and safety. But perhaps we have allowed them to calcify into rigidity. The universe evolves, and so must we. The vote was not unanimous, but the outcome was clear. Earth would be accepted into the concordance, with all their conditions recognized not as exceptions, but as integral components of the Earth package. Arbiter Vex, the senior council member, addressed him directly. Your caution is valued and necessary. Someone must manage the inevitable chaos that will accompany this integration. Therefore, the Council appoints you to lead the Earth Integration Committee. Theron's light patterns froze in shock. Senior member, I must object. Your objection is noted and overruled. The ancient being replied with a hint of amusement in its crystalline patterns. Your precision and commitment to protocol make you the ideal counterbalance to human improvisation. Perhaps both approaches will learn from each other. Later, as the formal integration preparations began, Theron confronted Ambassador Reed in a rare moment when she was alone. This was your strategy from the beginning, he accused, his patterns pulsing with indignation. The seemingly arbitrary conditions, the disruptions, the cultural performances, all calculated to demonstrate your species' approach while undermining our established procedures. Reed smiled enigmatically. Not calculated, arbiter, that would be too rigid a term. Let's call it improvised with purpose. She gestured to a nearby refreshment station. Earl Grey tea. I've noticed your species seems capable of absorbing liquids through surface contact. You manipulated the concordance, Theron insisted, ignoring the offer. We introduced ourselves honestly, she countered. Would you have preferred we pretend to be something we're not? Suppress our nature to appear more like you? That would have been the true manipulation. Her expression softened. The universe is vast and unpredictable, Arbiter Vex. Different approaches to navigating it aren't threatening. They're complementary. Throughout the station, the evidence of Earth's influence was already spreading. The Central Promenade now featured a permanent Earl Grey tea service station, where delegates from various species attempted to explain Earth idioms to each other with varying degrees of success. The Humans Cultural Exchange Troupe had announced the first official interstellar improvisational cultural workshop, with surprising participation from species Theron would never have predicted. In the evening cycle, Theron stood observing the station's main concourse, now slightly less sterile than before. The mathematically precise arrangement of seating had been subtly altered into conversational groupings. The sound of soft jazz drifted from the human quarters. A group of diverse delegates was attempting to explain their own species' equivalent of humor to fascinated humans. Lyra joined him, her pheromones expressing contentment. The integration processes have begun ahead of schedule, she reported. 17 species have already requested Earth cultural liaisons for their home systems. The concordance will never be the same, Theron noted, his light pattern somber. Is that necessarily negative? Lyra produced a small container of Earl Grey tea she had somehow acquired and offered it to him. Change is the universe's only constant. After a moment's hesitation, Theron extended a crystalline appendage and absorbed a small amount of the amber liquid. The molecular structure was complex, the the flavor profile unexpectedly nuanced. I have initiated mandatory idiom comprehension training for my staff, he admitted, his patterns shifting to a thoughtful blue. The productivity implications of miscommunication are too significant to ignore. A practical decision, Lyra approved. They stood in silence, watching the unprecedented mingling of species and protocols in the concourse. The perfect order of the concordance had indeed been irreversibly disrupted. The future looked chaotic, unpredictable, and potentially more interesting than it had in millennia. Perhaps, Theron said finally, his light patterns stabilizing into a new, more complex pattern. Adaptation is not entirely without merit. Nearby, a human was attempting to teach a Lithian how to dance to jazz. The crystalline being's movements were stiff and precise, but gradually becoming more fluid. Impossibly, its light patterns seemed to synchronize with the music's rhythm. Theron absorbed another drop of tea and made a note to schedule additional observation sessions. For research purposes only, of course.